You're listening to Radio Free Radio.
Paralysis, why is paralysis a syllable? Why is it no more life? Paralysis, why is paralysis a syllable? Why is it no more lively? Paralysis, why is paralysis a syllable? Why is it no more lively?
You've just heard an excerpt from Samuel Vriezen's musical setting for Gertrude Stein's first play, What Happened, a 5-act play. You'll be hearing more of that piece and from the composer very soon. I'm Adam Frank, and thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of Radio Free Radio. First, I'd like to thank the Public Humanities Hub at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver for supporting this podcast. And second, I'd like to thank those of you listening now, those who tuned in 2 weeks ago to our first episode when I talked to composer Dan Warner about his Stein setting. If you missed that episode and want to listen to it, you can find a link at the project website. That's radiofreestein.com/plays/broadcasts. That episode includes an introduction to the Radio Free Stein project that should give you a sense of why I've been pursuing these musical interpretations of Stein's plays for the last few years. Today, I'll be speaking with Amsterdam-based composer Samuel Vriezen and listening to excerpts from a recording of a composition of his that received its premiere performance in Paris in June of 2019. But before introducing Samuel and his work, I want to say a few words about the basis of our collaboration, Stein's play, What Happened. You can look over that play by clicking on the link at the bottom of the YouTube broadcast page. What Happened, written in 1913, was Gertrude Stein's very first play. It's a kind of melodrama that recreates the experience of writing a play in the wake of a party. At least, that's the understanding that a group of us arrived at during a workshop held in Copenhagen in May of 2016 that was hosted by Laura Schultz at the University of Copenhagen. There's a lively group of Stein readers and translators in Denmark, I discovered, and I had a chance to read and talk about the play with them. Over the course of the workshop, we found out that what happens in the play is not the party itself, but resonances or memories of the party and an exploration of the role that these memories play in the act of composition. So Stein tells us in her lecture called Plays, here's a quote, "I remember very well the first one I wrote. I called it What Happened, a play. I had just come home from a pleasant dinner party, and I realized then, as anybody can know, that something is always happening." According to Ulla Dido, the great Stein scholar and editor, What Happened was prompted by a party that Stein attended on April 8, 1913, to celebrate the painter Harry Gibbs' birthday. Dido suggests that we may be hearing or reading bits of dialogue from the party in the play. But at the workshop, we weren't very persuaded by this idea. As far as we could tell, the play didn't really represent or document a party and its group of friends. What happened is the thinking, feeling, and remembering that goes into the play and goes into the play writing that follows the party. That is, what happened is the play itself getting written. This idea that the play recreates its own writing, that it's utterly reflexive, helped us to make sense of what's probably its most enigmatic feature, the numbers. In the version that was published in Geography and Plays in 1922, and that's what you may be looking at right now, small numbers written out in parentheses are interspersed with the lines of the play. So just what are these numbers? Are they stage directions that refer to the number of voices or characters? In the play manuscript, which I looked at the Beinecke Library, in which Dido published in a Gertrude Stein reader, these numbers are centered, a more common placement for scene titles. I noticed that these numbers, with just 2 exceptions, count the paragraphs that follow. At the workshop, we concluded that the numbers structured each of the 5 acts of the play into scenes, with each scene broken down into 1 or more paragraphs. It's interesting that Stein in her very first play is proposing a new dramatic convention, that scenes are built out of paragraphs, rather than dialogue and action as they usually are. Counting, addition, other number operations are everywhere in this play. Take a look at its second paragraph, which in my radio script adaptation became Act 1, Scene 2. It starts, "A single sum, 4 and 5 together, and 1, not any sun, a clear signal and an exchange." Stephen Meyer, a colleague and a friend who was at the workshop, pointed out that the numbers in this sentence actually count the words in the sentences that precede it. Loud and no cataract has 4 words. Not any nuisance is depressing has 5. Stein's play observes its own writing and notices that individual words add up to sentences, a single sum, 4 and 5 together, and that sentences then add up to paragraphs, and 1. Actually, these words combine to form a sentence that is also a paragraph. This is some kind of odd transmutation. The wordplay of some, sun, and single, signal, transform number words, some and single, into qualitative images that are highly expressive, sun and signal. In these first words, sentences, and paragraphs, quantity turns into quality, and individual units combine rather than only sum. Laura Schultz has pointed out that combination is a key concept for Stein. At the beginning of the lecture plays, she describes her discovery, here's another quote, that sentences are not emotional and that paragraphs are. And she says that this is not a contradiction, but a combination. If unemotional sentences combine somehow to form emotional paragraphs, in this play, Stein is exploring a related idea, that emotional paragraphs combine to become scenes. Conventionally, in narrative drama, a scene is a basic building block in which at least one character engages in action, including speech, in a fixed setting at a continuous time. This action is motivated and it has some kind of emotional underpinning. And a spectator's attention is often absorbed trying to understand what motivates the speech or the action. In Stein's first play, she goes right to the root of this basic convention and wonders, how do you build a theatrical scene out of emotional paragraphs? And her answer seems to be by counting. In our understanding, then, what happened, a 5-act play recreates the composition of play form itself by counting units and building the play from prosaic parts of speech. It stages the combination of words into sentences, sentences into paragraphs, paragraphs into scenes, and scenes into the acts out of which the play as a whole can emerge. So that should do for now as a way to set the stage for a discussion with Samuel Vriezen, who's a composer and a poet and an essayist, who's joining me from Amsterdam. So Samuel, very pleased to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So Samuel, of all the composers I've worked with on the Radio Free Stein project, you're the one who's been most influenced by Stein's writing and thinking. Can you tell us a little bit about that influence on your music?
Yeah, sure. I think it's probably mostly a fortuitous accident. I think that I happened to be reading and getting very excited about her work as I was graduating as a student composer, and and flailing about in the world of contemporary music styles, trying to find my own corner. But somehow the encounter with the work of Stein really provided me with some key notions that made some things coalesce for me, and that was very helpful. Particularly the 2 texts that I think I would single out for this. I mean, I've been drawn to her work widely, and I've been reading it and reading at it extensively. But I think the 2 texts that I found the most, that I ended up thinking about the most, were the lecture, Poetry and Grammar, and the longer text, An Acquaintance with Description. And it's in An Acquaintance with Description is a text that I've hardly come back to after reading it for the first time, because it was such an emotional encounter. So speaking of the emotional effects of paragraphs, I think that is a text that for me had an immensely powerful emotional quality that emerged somehow from its long run of paragraphs, which are highly, look highly abstract at first. I mean, in a conventional way, it's extremely hard to tell what's going on, but it is a landscape of text, and it is deeply moving, or at least I experienced it as such. And then I was extremely interested to see that in Poetry and Grammar, which is one of the lectures in America, she actually explores what I understood to be this moving quality of language in an almost literal way. So exploring language at the level of individual syntactic and grammatical units, and examining what a single word can do, where it moves, so to speak, and how it moves. That is how I read her description of grammatical categories in Poetry and Grammar.
I like the idea of reading at Stein in that way. It's almost like you have to take it and read it right back at the page itself in order to make any sense of it. And how does that analysis of the units of language help? How did that help you with your ideas of musical composition?
So that has a lot to do, I think, well, it has a lot to do with the way you build phrases. There is an obvious musicality, I would say, in Gertrude Stein, which makes many composers drawn to her, and which is also, I guess, why she worked with composers like Virgil Thomson. But specifically, what I was interested in is how these units, as dynamic units, actually help you construct these larger continuities. And I think maybe I can talk a little bit from the context that I was coming out of, which was the new music context as I had been learning it in school at the conservatory in The Hague, where I think still the thinking was very much that there are two major categories, or maybe three, let's say, in contemporary music at that time. One coming out of expressionism, where the gesture is thought to be an almost complete thing that contains a lot of emotional information, and the other Stravinsky and leading into minimalism, where things are thought a little bit differently. Especially in minimalism, of course, you have endless repetition that creates a continuity. And what I liked so much in finding in Stein is that you can also make these continuities without quite repeating, by actually being extremely attentive to the dynamic qualities of individual words. And that way, patterning sentences and paragraphs that convey emotional information by the way they move, but also the way they stop and start, and things like that. But without ever giving up this sense of a continuity, this sense of landscape that I guess we might also talk about in the context of this play.
Yes, certainly. That's really interesting. I'm intrigued by the idea that something about Stein's writing kind of lets the words be themselves, as it were, individually, but then also insists that they're always in succession, right? So that there's some kind of continuity but the succession is never determinative. It's never determining. And that's actually how she talks about the relation between sentences and paragraphs, that sentences somehow find their own balance, as she puts it. But the thing about paragraphs is that they don't find their balance. They themselves limit and kind of constrain, as it were, the balances of the sentences. And that somehow is what makes them emotional. It's not quite clear to me how to get from one to the other, but that's her basic thinking. Something about succession is totally crucial for the idea of the paragraph as limiting and registering an emotion.
Yeah, and I guess that in many of these works, and certainly in the long paragraph with long sentences works, such as An Acquaintance with Description, she is also very much working with exploding maybe this distinction between sentence and paragraph as a resource, right? And that you sometimes have quite long sentences with seeming repetition in it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it seems to have something also to do with, I mean, I was thinking a little bit also about your own interest in groups, the way that musicians interact in performance. And the way you use a lot of traditional classical sort of European instrumentation in your work. You don't do a lot of electronic composition as far as I've heard, but you are very much in the kind of post-Cagean tradition and thinking about music in a very broad sense about what happens on the stage, what happens between the performers. can you say a little bit about that and how it shows up in this particular composition that I'm hoping we're going to hear an excerpt from in a minute?
Sure, yeah. So for me, this is a slightly later development from that came into my music and my musical thinking after I was so impressed by Stein's work. But and I think if it is Cajun, it's especially the Christian Wolff side of John Cage, so to speak. So John Cage got a lot from his yeah, I guess you could say student Christian Wolff, or friend, or collaborator maybe, which was very much so. In Christian Wolff's music, you have a very strong attention to how every musical event is actually an action performed by people who relate themselves to other people. He turned this into an exploration of new types of musical form, which are almost like games, where you get basically instructions or maybe moves, admissible moves for how you can relate to somebody else doing something. The emergent musical structure comes out of these moves that are prescribed. So I performed for 1, 2, or 3 people by Christian Wolff, and that experience, doing that with some friends, made a lasting impression. So I started to understand, just as you can form sentences and paragraphs out of these units of motion, you can also form larger musical forms out of units of interaction. I'm very interested in that, to explore, simply find ways to explore how you can do that. So it has increasingly featured in my work.
Should we listen?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Should we listen to a piece? I mean, I have a feeling that if we listen to a piece, then you can also tell us a little bit about what's going on in it, and then people will get a sense of some of these techniques. So I want to play an excerpt. The piece as a whole is about an hour long, so obviously we're not going to be able to play the whole thing for you. But right now we'll play the first 2 scenes from Act 3, which is really the center or crux of Stein's 5-act play. In this, it'll be about 5 minutes of music. For us, the act was ruminating on composition, and I thought of it as using a vaguely fugal form that, that Samuel then interpreted, and you'll see how he does that. You'll be hearing the voice of Aurélie Lehrman as W, the writer, and of Deborah Walker as A, the imagined audience. Deborah also plays cello, and there are other instruments and performers who I'll tell you about later when we listen to another excerpt. The recording is of a performance that was held at the Hôtel de Lausanne in Paris in June 2019 at the Paris Institute for Advanced Study, and our sound engineer was Benjamin Momus.
A cut is not a slice. What is the occasion for representing a cut and a slice? What is the occasion for all that? A cut is a slice.
Great, that was an excerpt from Act 3 of Samuel Vriezen's musical setting for What Happened, a 5-act play. And Samuel, would you say that that was more a cut or more a slice of Stein's play and your music?
So that is, yeah, that is the question, isn't it? Is there any question?
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what is it that we were listening to?
Is there any question when a cut and a slice are just the same, right? That's what she says. So it is. It's maybe a part where the question of the distinction between a cut and a slice is being put. I definitely wanted to do something with that musically, but it's also there are also these game and interaction elements in how that works. So I guess one of the things that I was interested in is this attempt of a group of people to be in the same time, maybe you could say. But what is the same time when everybody is a little bit cutting up time, so to speak, a little bit differently? So I guess that is what group dynamics are, really. People not quite being in the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah, but still together. And so I think there is a number of layers that I could be talking about here. Let me try to do that. So first of all, in your libretto, Adam, here you suggested that this might be a fugue. And this, of course, gets me thinking, what does a fugue mean for me? You know, does it mean theme and counter subject and counter subject and all of that stuff? Or does it mean maybe this contrapuntal not quite togetherness, so to speak? Also, I think you write in the libretto something like it should invoke what is it? A chant-like fugue? Is that the word that you use?
I might have. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it could be there, exactly, yeah. And so what I ended up doing was to have a rather formal kind of declamation on a single note as a starting point, but already giving the instruction that the two singers, one of whom is also a cellist at this point, that they're not completely together, but they're almost together. So that's one level where they are negotiating their relationship to one another, There are just a few key moments where they have to, let's say, breathe together or something, but otherwise, I want it to be heterophonic. So that's one element. The other element is that the music takes it gradually starts taking itself through a series of rather smooth modulations, you could say. But these modulations are also very slowly articulated. You can hear the harmonic regions in the plucked instruments, but also the wind instruments are playing very slightly sunny around that. And at the same time, the voices get the instruction to shift their pitch very slowly as they speak in this not quite together way from one chord note to the next chord note. So these are very slow transitions between situations. So that's like making time a little bit more blurry, the moments of time. And then there is the third level, which is that two of the instruments are given the role of camera shutter. And so they make these, I mean, you indicated in the libretto that these noises, these camera noises should be in there. And I interpret that as a little extra game element where the guitarist and the violist were given the magical power, so to speak, with their camera shutter-like noise that they would produce instrumentally to stop time. So that everybody would be holding the pitch, which is usually a pitch in the middle of some transition or something, between one chord and another, and they would hold it at wherever they are, which is I think very nice to listen to, because first of all I was really surprised in performance to realize that I could really not predict what the sounds would be like when they would be held, because I don't know in advance quite where people will be when this camera shutter noise is made and they're supposed to stay wherever they are. So the combinations that came out were always very strange, and every time they surprised me completely in terms of their sonic quality. I like that. The other thing is that there is a bit of a game going on in that wind instruments and voices, they don't have infinite breath. So they cannot quite be static. And of course, this is a little game that I give to the guitar and viola player to play with and to find the edges of what is possible, so that the static moments are not quite static either. They are more like
well, there's always succession, right? I mean, I think what I hear in your description, as well as in the music itself, is this real exploration of both continuity and discontinuity, the way that these individual moments are nonetheless somehow already happening in the previous moment or going to happen in the next moment. There's a very odd kind of looping quality to it, which is kind of puts us in this rather weird state, which I really enjoy, and I'm also made uncomfortable by, which I think happens with a lot of Stein's writing. I wanted to just say another word and also play a second excerpt where you're also asking the performers to play a game. You've set up a set of instructions for them. It's a kind of a structured improvisation in some sense. And it's an excerpt from, it's actually the whole of Act 2. And it also, one of the interesting things about it, because there's so many different modalities between singing, speaking, chanting, and other ways of using intonation in your composition, this is the one where we hear song most explicitly. Yeah. It's a series of, what you describe as drinking songs, which we'll talk about in a minute.
The first one I thought of as very much a drinking song, but yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah. So this is the chorus. The chorus basically consists of members of the Daedalus Ensemble. It's a French group that we were lucky to work with. The members of that ensemble who were playing were Emily Burson on flutes, who also plays a character called the Qualifier. Pierre-Stéphane Muguet, who is on alto saxophone, who played the Splitter of Hairs. Fabrice Villard on bass clarinet, who played the Seeker of Definitions. And Thierry Madiot on trombone as the Negator. And we also have the strings, Deborah Walker on cello, Cyprien Bussolini on viola, and Didier Achour on guitar, and he also directs the Daedalus Ensemble. So this is Act 2 of What Happened.
Act 2.
Four and nobody wounded, five and nobody flourishing, six and nobody talkative, eight and nobody sensible, four and nobody wounded, five and nobody flourishing, six and nobody talkative, eight and nobody sensible, four and nobody wounded, five and nobody flourishing, six and nobody talkative, eight and nobody sensible, four and nobody wounded, five and nobody flourishing, six and left and leave, that is so heavy that there is no way of pronouncing perfectly. One and the left hand leave, that is so heavy that there is no way of.
That is so great that the reason left in all the chains of swelling, a point of accuracy, a point of a strange talk, a point that is so sober that the reason left in all the chains of swelling, a point of accuracy, a point of a strange talk, a point that is so sober that the reason left in all the chains of swelling, a point of accuracy, a point of a strange talk, a point that is so sober that the reason left in all the chains of swelling, a point of accuracy.
The same three.
A wide oak, a one in a fold, a very white cake, a lightning cookie, a single white open and exchange box, filled with the same little signs that shines. A wide oak, a one in a fold, a very white cake, a lightning cookie, a single white open and exchange box, filled with the same little signs that shines. A wide oak, a one in a fold, a very white cake, a lightning cookie, a single white open and exchange box, filled with the same little signs that shines. The only better and more left-footed stranger, the best, the only better and more left-footed stranger, the best, the only better and more left-footed stranger. The best and potatoes, the very kind as there is in no lemons, oranges, apples, pears and potatoes. The very kind as there is in no lemons, oranges, apples, pears and potatoes. The very kind as there is in no lemons, oranges, apples, pears and potatoes. The very kind as there is in no lemons, oranges, apples, pears and potatoes. The very kind as there is in no lemons, oranges, apples, pears and potatoes. The very kind as there is in no lemons, oranges, apples.
The same three.
The same frame, a solder portal, a singular gate,
and a bracketed mistress.
the same
Frame, a solder portal, a singular gate, and a bracketed mistress. The same frame, a solder portal, a singular gate, and a bracketed everywhere, and yet where strangely there is a power and a wholesale, a rich market where there is no memory of Clungum collection, a survey, a ticket and a return to laying over. A collection, a Clungum collection, a survey, a ticket and a return to laying over. A collection, a Clungum collection, a survey, a ticket and a return to laying over. A collection, a Clungum collection, a survey, a ticket and a return to laying over. A collection,
That was Act 2 from Samuel Vriezen's musical setting for Gertrude Stein's play, What Happened? So much happening there, Samuel. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a couple of things about what kinds of instructions you gave to the chorus members, the ensemble?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I think this is the point in your libretto where you first most clearly actually ask for song, and I forget how the processes went, but for some reason I had a lot of trouble trying to conceptualize this act until I realized that these really should just simply be as simply as possible, just songs, 3 songs, the same 3 songs, and then the same 3 songs. So you have 3 scenes, which are the same 3 all over. So they're the same 3 in that sense too. So the same 9 maybe. And I think well, one of the things I really like about performance, by the way, is that some of the humor in the text comes out so more clearly. So after I had made the decision that these should be songs, and the first, well, based on your decision, of course, that they should be songs, but when I started taking that literally, I noticed that the very first line, 4 and nobody wounded, 5 and nobody flourishing, 6 flourishing, 6 and nobody talkative, 8 and nobody sensible. It has a very song-like lilt, but it also seems a counting song that seems to suggest a stage of increasing inebriation. And in performance, some of the humor of that comes out, I think, so beautifully, because Aurélie announces, and then she disappears for this entire act. This is one of the few acts where she has little to do, but she announces Act 2, and she's immediately corrected, or that's how it sounds like to me, by Didier, the guitarist, who is playing a guitar riff and then say, 3. So Act 2, no, it's 3. And then Amélie just stands up and starts singing because she knows a song. 4 and nobody wounded, 5 and nobody flourishing, 6 and nobody talkative, 8 and nobody sensible. So it goes from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. So there is some mounting excitement there. And what then happens is quite simply that everybody in the ensemble knows a song. They bring in their song. And so they interrupt one another. And it's meant to evoke this sense that, oh, I know a song, I have a good one. Some enthusiasm that just draws them in to start joining the next song and to just start joining the next song. And eventually, of course, that explodes into an improvised, well, something that might actually be quite fugue-like in a way at the very end. So there is one more thing that I want to say about this, which is one of the great joys for me of this act is quite simply hearing everybody's voices. By making this process of, I know a song, oh, I'll join. By making that into game rules and slightly unpredictable, you actually hear a lot of individual vocal qualities. I mean, these are not professional singers, of course, but everybody has a voice, and you hear that, and you hear various combinations of that, and you hear various interactions on the micro level of timbre. And it comes out very nicely, I feel, in this act, so I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very enjoyable, especially very enjoyable to watch. And when we'll be hearing in a minute, when we go to the interlude, the difference that Stein is thinking about, the difference between seeing and hearing performers, which actually makes some sense of this particular act as well. And then the other thing that it occurs to me to think about while I'm listening to it this time is that I like how in committing to song, you're also committing to the way that songs kind of fasten themselves in our memories, whether we like it or not. And,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they kind of like they resonate in our memories and in our minds, and then try to get rid of them as we might, they refuse to, and that also seems to be what's going on in this scene. These songs keep on coming back. They keep on coming back over and over again, despite whatever else is happening, even if they're conflicting and contradicting each other. And the writer is the W character, Aurélie, who isn't participating, is in some sense just watching this happen and saying, oh, that's one way I could go. That's one way I could go, but I don't want to go that way. I'm not going to commit to the kind of resonance that song offers in this play. She entertains it, and then she refuses to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a new reading already again.
Exactly, it's working. So I want to, because I want time for the Q&A. I want to play just one more excerpt here. I'll just say a word or two about it. The radio script that I wrote evolved over time, and it eventually integrated excerpts from Stein's lecture plays that I've been quoting from today and last time between the acts, as it were, so that the play and the lecture can illustrate each other. And I want us to play one of those interludes. It actually takes place exactly after the act you just heard, and it's interlude 2. And so let's ask Josh to play that last one.
What happens on the stage? And how does one feel about it? Is the thing seen or the thing heard the thing that makes most of its impression upon you at the theater? How much has the hearing to do with it, and how little does the thing heard replace the thing seen? Does it help or does it interfere with it? And when you are taking part in something really happening, does the thing seen or does the thing heard affect you? Can you wait to hear or can you wait to see? And which excites you most? And reading an exciting book, one sees, but one also hears. And when the story is at its most exciting, does one hear more than one sees? I am posing all these questions because, of course, in writing, all these things are really most entirely really exciting. And in asking a question, one is not answering, but one is, as one may say, deciding about knowing. In asking these questions,
Although there is no one who answers them,
there is in them that there is knowledge. Knowledge is what you know.
That was Interlude 2, an excerpt from Plays, the lecture that we had Aurélie sing. I do love her voice. She's doing such an amazing job in those, well, everywhere, but especially in that interlude, I find. So Samuel, just tell us just a word or two about what went into your choices about the intonations in the interludes.
Yeah, so the interludes are outside of the play, I would say. Of course, the text is from another text, right? It's from the lecture plays, so it reflects back on on a play that already reflects about its on its own writing. But I felt that I wanted, in order not to just lose my way in the complexity of this structure, I wanted the interludes and the acts to be quite different, like two different types of structure or feeling, maybe, that articulate one another by being different. And so the interludes became mostly, but ultimately not exclusively, but mostly drone-based. And that allows for a kind of delivery that I think was very nice, because so the W character is going back between being a writer and explaining something about writing plays. In explaining something about writing plays, that is a very public kind of delivery. And so that could have a little bit more of, let's say, a formal setting, almost ritual, maybe even, and it goes there in the next interlude, actually, that we don't have here. And so that does lead also to a different way of conceptualizing text setting, I think. So drone-based means that you almost inevitably, you're going to be relating much more with the overtones of some low drone or something that is in existence there. And that is one of the things that gives it a different quality and a certain kind of intensity, I think. It's very different from the songs, and also very different from the, well, quote unquote, fugue that follows, I guess. So yeah. Much of the piece is very much about these different, it ends up being very much about these differences of delivery.
That's right, and that's one of the things that I really like about your musical setting, is that it really moves between various forms of relating speech and intoned speech. I mean, all speech is intoned, but yeah, you can amplify the intonation or mute it in different ways, and you really explore so many different kinds. For anyone interested in listening to the whole piece, it is available on the project website. You can go check that out. It's 63 minutes long, and you can get a sense of this entirety. I think we should maybe open it up to the Q&A at this point. At the bottom of the YouTube page, you may have to click on Show More, and then if you click on Show More and click on the Zoom invitation, you can enter our discussion here. Please do keep your cameras off so we can maintain the radio call-in style. And please remember to lower the volume on your computer to avoid feedback between your Zoom call and the YouTube broadcast. So if anyone wants to participate, we have about 9 minutes and we can take in questions or comments. I see that Marguerite is connecting to the audio.
but muted.
I'm seeing whether she can unmute. Yes. Can you, do you have your question, Marguerite?
Oh, hi. I'm sorry. There was no way to make sure I was still muted. I did not have a question, although now that I'm here, Samuel, I was so delighted to hear this again. For anyone else listening, I was at this performance. Is that where this recording comes from?
This recording, I think, was made the day before on the afternoon. Was it that, or the day before? I forget the exact time.
Yeah, we recorded it twice. Once dress rehearsal and once at the performance itself. And we Benjamin edited them together for the best version of this.
Well, I won't keep other people from asking their questions, but I just want to say that I can't get over how good these pieces sound, just sort of spaced apart. So it was a real treat. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a pleasure to hear.
It's nice that there's one happy listener. Well, while we're waiting for anyone else to join us with any questions or comments, I'm not sure if you wanted to say anything more about some of your compositional choices. Some of the other ways, especially that that Stein's text moved into some forms of music for you.
Yeah, so definitely in this piece, it's the connection is the clearest, right? And so this piece turned into quite an anthology of ways of dealing with Stein's text. And so every act has its approach. So some of the things that we tried and that I liked a lot to work with was to try to see if instrumentalists in the piece are connected to some of the words in the text, and I try to get them to play these notes as much as possible as if they were articulating those words. This is something that I really enjoyed working on. I think there is actually more space to explore that, and so that is definitely something. And I think so this was also related to this idea that every word has its own, let's say, dynamic quality, made a bit more literal within the piece. Yeah.
I see we have Dean Rosenthal, who's joining us on the Zoom chat. So is there a question, comment, or observation you would like to make?
Wait, are you able to hear me? Or
We are.
Sure. Hey, Dean.
Samuel, long time.
Hey.
Hello, hello. No, I mean, I had listened to the program, and I just wanted to thank the two of you for presenting it. One thing I found truly fascinating that was not immediately apparent to me had been the counting among the paragraphs and the sentences that was described at the beginning of the broadcast. So I don't know if there's really much more to say about that, but it was something I was unaware of in what happened, and I found that really exciting.
Yeah, thanks. One of the exciting parts about doing this is just discovering things. There's always something happening in Stein's work, and it's just, she knows what it is, and it's sort of, or I think she sort of has an idea, whatever it is, she's trying to work it out, and then we either have an idea about it or we don't have an idea about it. But needing to work with the play for so long and so intensively as this kind of sonic staging requires you to, leads to new ideas about the plays, which is of course the point of the project.
Yeah, the counting in this piece is so funny because it's often so chaotic. I mean, not quite chaotic because ultimately it's always very purposeful, but this counting, like, you know, as in Act 2, 3, 4 and nobody wounded, 5 and nobody flourishing, 6 and nobody talkative, 8 and nobody sensible. And then of course you might wonder, for instance, why not 7? And I remember that during the Copenhagen reading, Stephen put forward that question.
What
And so, what is the answer? What can really be the only answer? I think we came up with that 7 is 2 syllables. So that is very much the kind of joke that Stein, I think, likes to make. I mean, there is a very strange kind of humor everywhere, which takes some close reading sometimes to find.
Yeah.
I mean, the counting, it happens a lot.
Yeah, that was definitely that's one area that I found really stimulating to ascertain, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, and it comes up if you're interested if you look at the play in Act 4, for example, the heading is 4 and 4 more, and it's on the question of what this means. There's 4 paragraphs, 1, 2, 3, 4, but then there's a 5th paragraph. But then the 5th paragraph has literally 4 mores in it at the very end. Many, many more, and many more, many more, many, many more. So it does seem like something about counting words and creating the form of the play from counting is totally central to what she's up to here.
Yeah.
No.
Or the reverse. Huh? It's like making a play and then counting it, and then counting what you just did is also part of what you're doing.
Right.
So it's not let's say a pre-set up counting structure. It's not like that.
No, well,
No.
Stein says she doesn't like to count 1, 2, 3, 4. She likes to count 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1.
She does have 5 acts though, and that is very significant. But I think.
Do you want to talk about that, Samuel? Why are 5 acts significant?
Because it's so traditional.
Okay, right.
and Stein is of course playing with that, certainly at this moment. All the Greek tragedies had 5 acts.
Right, the well-made play of the 19th century, and it's incredible structure.
So she sticks with convention in that department.
Absolutely, yeah, but with a twist.
Always with a twist.
Yeah.
So I think we're approaching 3 o'clock, which is the time when we'll have to end our broadcast. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank you, Samuel, for joining me here, and I want to thank the listeners and the participants and the call-in. So thank you all for joining me. And in 2 weeks, if you're interested, we'll be doing this again with the composer Dave Chokroun discussing He Said It, a monologue, which is another Gertrude Stein play from the 19-teens. So I'll sign off now, and I'll thank you all for tuning into Radio